Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi hamda shakirin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala sayyidina Muhammad طب القلوب ودوائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. After a long time, we have resumed with the live streams, and today's subjects are, of course, of an extreme importance. Firstly, we have to discuss Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan in full, and then we will discuss what is actually meant by one-state solution, because there have been many people contacting me with regard to this and making objections with the calls to demilitarize what is known as the State of Israel, and with regard to what is known as the one-state solution. What do we actually mean by one-state solution? Now, after that, we will also look at your party. So this your party, which is being led by Jeremy Corbyn, we will look at your party and the strategy Muslims should take with regard to voting, and who we vote in as strategic policy makers in this country, as well as the issue of Tommy Robinson. So Tommy Robinson has been placing some of my clips out of context. He has done this with other Muslim influencers as well as some of the imams of certain masajid, and I will address Tommy Robinson and his supporters. But before we do that, I would want to go into the recent ceasefire in Gaza, and with regard to the recent ceasefire, we have firstly meaning Donald Trump, he unveiled the plan at the White House on 29th of September alongside Benjamin Netanyahu, the war criminal, and he said that their side has accepted the terms. After which, on October the 3rd, at that time, Hamas said it to return all 48 remaining hostages that were being held in Gaza. Now, what I want you to note is that I am reading from a BBC article. In that BBC article, they refer to the Palestinian hostages as prisoners. So what is mentioned on point number 5 of Donald Trump's 20 points, on point number 5, what he mentions, what is written, what is composed by his policy makers, is that once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners, plus 1,700 Gazans who were detained after 7th of October 2023, including all women and children detained in that context. So note here how the Western media, this outlet which is known as the BBC, we pay our TV license. Well, those of you who have a TV and pay the license, or you utilize any BBC application, it's essential by British law to pay a TV license. People pay their TV license only to have to be propagandized, to have propaganda shoved into their minds. One of those pieces of propaganda here is that the Israeli hostages are referred to as hostages but Palestinians, including women and children, that are detained in that context. Look at the language. Look at the nature of the double speak. And what you state, they state is that they are detained in that context. Now, the people, can you stop spamming? By doing that, you will not get the answer to the question. So, it states once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners, but 1,700 Gazans who were detained. Now, what they do not mention, Gazans, people from Gaza, some of them were beaten, some of them were tortured, some of them were maimed, some of them were raped and assaulted sexually, including minors, including women, including vulnerable people, including doctors. That is not mentioned. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. That is what is mentioned. Now, there are a few additional points within the 20 points of Donald Trump. Firstly, point number 1, we come across Gaza will be de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. So Gaza is being described as a radical terror zone, and the initiative of Donald Trump is to make it a de-radicalized terror-free zone. But nothing is mentioned with regard to what is referred to as Israel. Does Israel need to be de-radicalized? Remember that what is referred to as Israel today is split. It's a divided community between secularist extremist Jews and religious Jews that believe in a theocracy. Both are extremists, both carry out apartheid against the Palestinians, but they are divided at the same time. Those same religious extremist Jews are radicalized to the point that they construct illegal settlements in what is known as the West Bank, Ad-Dafatul Gharbiyya. And to date, over 700,000 people have been illegally settled. Illegal according to what is known as international law. So, when you say Gaza will be de-radicalized from terror, it should be mentioned that what is referred to as Israel should be de-radicalized. It should be made into a terror-free zone. Point number 2 he has, Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered more than enough. Who will redevelop Gaza? That is not mentioned. But point number 3 mentions that if both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended, and battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. So, what is mentioned here, that there is a suspension of military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment. Whether what is referred to as the state of Israel will pursue a military offensive post this deal is not mentioned. But what is mentioned in point 4, within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. So that needs to be accepted by what is known as the Knesset, what they refer to as the Israeli parliament. They have agreed, but not by an overwhelming majority, because Benjamin Netanyahu's government hinges upon its alliance with what is referred to as right-wing extremists. But I would want to mention to everyone that what they refer to as right-wing and left-wing in what is referred to as Israel, in reality this spectrum does not exist in the way it exists in other countries. Because what is referred to as left-wing is actually very extremist. Like the Labour government that ruled from the late 1960s into the 1970s. But there was more of a secular presence within what is referred to as the IDF in that period. But the growth of religious radicals within the Jewish settlements, due to the different schools that were founded within those settler communities, those settlers have rose to prominence with different parties within the Knesset that dictate the extreme policies of Israel, more extreme of the policies of what is referred to as Israel previous to the year 2000 or the 1970s. Of course, in the year 1998, for instance, Ariel Sharon famously said, announced that the young men should take to the hills. And of course, what is referred to as the Hilltop Group, which is a bunch of radical Jews, settlers that carry American weapons or weapons like the Uzi, they literally took to the hills within Palestinian villages, and what they did is indiscriminately kill Palestinians or take their land or bar them from accessing water, as well as carrying out acts of violence in the region. These are what are referred to as extremist settler groups. Now, condemnation in the past has occurred from, for instance, Barack Obama or Jimmy Carter. But or Bill Clinton, aside from verbal condemnation, there is no actual action taken by what is referred to as an international community. So, of course, what is referred to as the attacks on October the 7th, 2023 have changed much of people's perception with regard to what is referred to as the State of Israel. Now, point number 6 is important because what is mentioned, once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. So there is a policy here to de-weaponize Palestinian groups, to take away their weapons. So based upon this, if we follow through to point 7, it mentions, and this is an important point, upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. As of yet, the hostages have not been released. They are going to be released very soon. But as soon as this occurs, what is mentioned in this agreement is that aid will enter to the Gaza Strip At a minimum, aid quantities will be consistent with what was included in the 19th January 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity and sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads. What is not mentioned is that what is referred to as Israel has carried out violations of international law by destroying necessary infrastructure. When two countries go to war, of course, they will claim Gaza is not a country. They will claim that. But I will argue, according to international law, then what is referred to as Israel is not a country, because one of the conditions of a country is to have permanent borders. And Benjamin Netanyahu, you have no permanent borders. At one point, you invade Syria and attempt to annex parts of Syria, and at other times, you invade South Lebanon and Gaza and the West Bank, demonstrating that you do not have any set international borders. What is mentioned here also is entry of distribution and aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed, and this is an important point. Why? Because the aid and the entry of aid is what was utilized in the 2 years of the brutal conflict. Food and basic necessities were utilized by the Israeli side, what is referred to as the Israeli side, as a way of holding the people of Gaza to ransom. So what is mentioned, without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Cross, what is not mentioned, of course, is that Israel killed members of the United Nations group UNRWA, food distribution groups, claiming that even they were linked to Hamas. These were the war crimes carried out. In addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party, opening the Rafah crossing in both directions. So, with regard to opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under 19 January 2025 agreement. So Rafah crossing is an essential crossing for the entry of the aid. The point number 9 is very important. What is mentioned under point number 9? Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee. So what they mean to say is we will impose our own government upon the Palestinian people. Who will decide who are the technocrats? Who will decide who is apolitical? The fact that you are imposing a government upon the Palestinian people and claiming that a government must be apolitical. How can any government be apolitical? They state responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts, like they did in Iraq, who wrote down the Iraqi constitution after it was brutally invaded in 2003. With oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump, with other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. I will repeat that again, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. So you have this double speak, Board of Peace being mentioned, a Board of Peace which includes Tony Blair. do you see the contradiction? Tony Blair, the man who ravaged Iraq, the man responsible for invading Iraq on a false pretext, on the pretext of weapons of mass destruction. There are many young people who do not even know that history. Perhaps some of them were not even born in 2003. In 2003, the government of Tony Blair with the government of George Bush Jr. in the United States of America invaded Iraq on the false pretext, on false intelligence, that Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq at the time, had weapons of mass destruction. And remember, they were people who funded Saddam Hussein in the late 1970s to the late 1980s to wage war against Iran. The same people who supplied him with chemical weapons. They accused him of having weapons of mass destruction that can reach the United Kingdom within a short span of time on that pretext. And of course, this master shaitan, which is Benjamin Netanyahu, he at that time made many statements which were to encourage Western governments to destabilize and invade Iraq, literally to destroy Iraq. So this warmonger, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been a warmonger from many decades. And he is not only a Zionist, he is also a messianic Zionist. He falls within the bracket of people who believe that by waging war, they will bring about the Jewish Messiah. But within the past 2 years, he has been waging war for 2 years. The Jewish Messiah has not appeared. He has been waging war recklessly in South Lebanon, in general, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iran, in different regions of the Middle East, even Qatar, dropping bombs on Qatar. And yet his Messiah has not appeared. So to want former Prime Minister Tony Blair on what you refer to as a board of peace is doublespeak. George Orwell, whose name was also Blair, will be rolling in his grave. So what they state regarding this body will set the frame. And by the way, resistance groups they have refused to allow Tony Blair to be a part of this board of peace. They have unequivocally stated that they do not want Tony Blair to be a part of any committee that will become responsible for governing Gaza. What is stated, this body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority is the guys in the West Bank, the group of Mahmoud Abbas, has completed its reform program as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020. That is the time when Trump declared Jerusalem as the de facto capital of what they refer to as Israel, and what they refer to as a two-state solution with East Jerusalem as the capital for a Palestinian state. This in fact is, as I have always stated, a carrot dangling in front of the Palestinians and others, a state which has never come to fruition. And it only took 2 years of war, of ravaging Gaza, killing thousands, carrying out various crimes in Gaza, for some nations, the Anglo-Euro nations like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, ironically, which are also occupied lands, to declare a Palestinian state. What that entails is not very clear. So, what is mentioned that the President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal and can securely and effectively take back control of Gaza. This body will call on best international standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and is conducive to attracting investment. So these are some interesting points found further down. What he mentions is economic development. So point 10 mentions a Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created. So, by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East, this means, of course, corporate capitalism or Western style capitalism, whatever name you give to that type of capitalism, entering Gaza and Palestine. What he mentions on what the team that drafted this for Trump mentioned in point 11 is a special economic zone. In point 12, no one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. This is, of course, a positive point, that Gaza should not be deemed as a concentration camp or should not be left as a concentration camp. Some people refer to it as an open air prison. I disagree with the term prison. They do not deserve to be in a prison. People are taken into prisons. It's the largest concentration camp on earth. So what is mentioned, we will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. What relates to Hamas here also, Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly or indirectly or in any form. Of course, what is not mentioned, organizations can just rebrand. All military terror, and this point is very important, all military terror and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. What is not mentioned is that Gaza and Palestine, according to international law, have every right to build their own weapons, to have their own army. Will the Palestinian state that you are proposing have an army? Most nations on the earth have what is referred to as the nation states, which were founded after the 30 years war in Europe, the model of a nation state. Meaning after the 30 years war, treaties were written down, and we have the modern nation state model. According to that model, most of the nation states have an army. That is not elucidated within these 20 points. As if to say, at will, whenever what is referred to as Israel decides to invade, they can invade. What is stated here, there will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors. Those monitors are not specified. And what is mentioned, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. Of course, what is not mentioned is the right to return of over 800,000 Palestinians that were evicted or fled thinking they will be permitted to return. They fled due to the gangs have become known as the IDF. Those gangs that roamed, Jewish gangs, thugs, that roamed around Palestine, evicting people or claiming that their lives were under danger, and then people leaving and fleeing, and then now they have no right to return. So when the UN mandate occurred in 1948 and so-called Israel was declared in May 1948, around 55 to 56% of the land was given to a Jewish settler population. Land that, some of it was purchased, some of the land, earlier in the late 1800s. So when Zionism was founded in 1892, families like the Rothschild family, for instance, they funded people to settle in Palestine, to set up farms. And this is why so many of what are referred to as Israelis are brainwashed into thinking the land was empty. It was not empty. It was the Palestinians were there. But many rich Jewish people from Europe and other places, they purchased land. But they did not own and purchase 56% of the land. 56% of the land was given away by what is known as the UN, which claims to carry out peace programs across the world. And then, after the Nakba, and when Egypt and Jordan, for their own interests, entered Palestine, Jordan took the West Bank and what is known as Al-Quds al-Sharif, Jerusalem, while Egypt took Gaza. What is known as Israel took the rest. And 77% of what is Palestine became known as so-called Israel. 77%. So over 800,000 Palestinians were evicted into Jordan, into Syria, into other parts of the Middle East. And now, and of course, according to international law and UN resolutions, they are permitted to return. So none of that is mentioned. Why? Because the demography of what is referred to as Palestine will change if those people the demography of those residing in Palestinian land, it will change if those people returned. So what is mentioned, point 15 is very important. What point 15 mentions, and by the way, we will be doing questions and answers also. Keep your questions ready after I finish this segment. The United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force. So they refer to this as ISF. Which Arabs? It's not mentioned. Is it the UAE? It's not mentioned. But in point 16, within point 15, Egypt is mentioned. That the ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. Newly trained. What Donald Trump and his administration are doing, like they have superimposed different regimes and different populations in order to superimpose their own economic policies, cultural policies upon those populations. That is the intention with Gaza and Palestine. So in the West Bank, you have Mahmoud Abbas. But in Gaza, you superimpose your own border patrol and police force that impose the mukhabarat system, the intelligence systems that Syria had in the time of Bashar and Abdul Fattah Sisi has currently in Egypt, or the King of Morocco, or the King of Jordan, where you have security services that detain, torture, and imprison without the citizen having committed any real crime. So, what this proposes is to superimpose that on the population of Gaza. Then, point 16, it mentions Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza, which is good. But if what is referred to as Israel allowed or this agreement allowed the Palestinians the right of return, that would entail the end of what is known as Israel today, which I will go into the next segment when we cover the one-state solution. And what is mentioned in point 16 is that the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization. So that means they will not completely leave. It will be based upon stages, depending on all these conditions that have been mentioned. That will be agreed upon between the IDF, ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. But Gaza was never a threat to Egypt. Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF according to an agreement they will make with the transitional authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. Of course, there is no mention of a terror threat from the IDF. There is no mention of the terror threat that what is referred to as the IDF in what is known as the West Bank. In these regions, what is referred to as Israel from the time of 2023, October 2023 to 2024, how many people from the West Bank were killed and imprisoned, taken as hostages? So when the IDF go into the West Bank, kill thousands of Palestinians, imprison or take as hostages, as Palestinian hostages, that is not deemed as a terror attack. When Palestinians break into what is referred to as Israel and carry out the October 7th attacks, people like Piers Morgan want everyone to condemn this. But there is no equating between the two acts. Between the acts of what is known as the IDF, when it enters the West Bank, kills people at will, destroys their homes, not imprisons them, takes them as hostages, including children. There is an extra sympathy for the white Israelis, what are referred to as white Israelis, because they are in fact Americans, they are Europeans, and they have taken the land by force. It's a settler colonial entity, and it is linked to the Anglo-Euro white man, the Anglo-Euro construct, which in fact controls the UN, it controls the IMF, it controls the World Bank, an Anglosphere, an Anglo power structure or Anglo-Euro power structure that controls Canada, it controls New Zealand, it controls Australia, and of course all these countries share intelligence. So there is more sympathy. Piers Morgan is on the verge of tears because these are white people being killed, or journalists similar to Piers Morgan. So what is not mentioned here is the terror attacks of the IDF. What is also mentioned in the event, point 17, Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled up aid operation, will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. So what this entails is that if Hamas rejects the above proposal, point 16, which is with regard to the IDF withdrawal and a secure Gaza based upon the framework of Donald Trump, they state that aid will stop. The aid will stop except in terror-free areas, what they refer to as terror-free areas. So this is utilizing aid in order to carry out these guarantees. And of course, these 20 proposals were revised with whom? With Benjamin Netanyahu himself. Point number 18 is very interesting. Point number 18 is an interfaith dialogue process will be established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence to try and change mindsets and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits that can be derived from peace. It's not the Palestinians who do not tolerate. The Palestinians have been tolerating other faiths for hundreds of years. You have the Church of the Sepulchre. It was the Muslims who gave the Jewish people a safe haven within Jerusalem. What you refer to as the Wailing Wall was actually an Arab area known as the Hayyul Maghariba. It was known as the Hayyul Maghariba, and the occupation, the IDF, the occupation destroyed their homes. And in Israeli law today, the Knesset, the Israeli law, it does not give them the right to claim their land. That land belongs to Arabs, Muslims, who lived in that area. But the Muslims tolerated the Jews to the point they gave them synagogues in Jerusalem. They permitted them to have synagogues in Jerusalem. But how did the majority Jewish population, not all Jews, majority Jewish population, how did they repay that back? By destroying the Hayyul Maghariba. And this is the history you hide from the brainwashed population in what is referred to as Israel today. The brainwashed population in the United States of America. The brainwashed population here in the United Kingdom. And the brainwashed populations of Europe. Because you hold European people to guilt. You hold them to guilt for the Holocaust, an event for which the Muslims were not complicit. Yes, you may mention the Mufti of Palestine met Hitler, but what you do not mention is that in 1932, the Zionist organization met Hitler and agreed with Hitler that the Jewish population should be displaced from Germany and sent to Palestine. Zionism called for the displacement of the Jewish population from Germany and be sent forcefully to what is Palestine, relocate. The Zionists agreed to that. When Ken Livingstone mentioned this, he was referred to as anti-Semitic, and then he was removed from the Labour Party. Ken Livingstone, the former mayor of London. So a former mayor of London, he made a historical statement, yet the Zionist lobby in the UK had him removed from the Labour Party. He was a part of the Labour Party for many years. And he was the mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. He made that historical fact that Zionism worked with Hitler. So Zionists like pointing out that the Mufti who was appointed by the British, went and met Hitler. There's a famous picture of that. But what they do not mention is that Zionists worked with Hitler in 1932. So Zionism is anti-Jewish. Zionism is what tarnishes the Jewish people. The Jewish religion has been hijacked by Zionism itself. So when you talk about dialogue, you need to talk to all these extremist Jews, settlers in the West Bank, over 700,000 of them illegally settled in the West Bank. When you talk about peaceful dialogue, talk to the rabbis here in the UK. A call out to all you rabbis who are pro-Israel in the UK. You cannot debate me and prove from your own Torah that the land of Palestine belongs to what you refer to as the State of Israel. Not a single rabbi in the entire UK. The challenge is open. You cannot debate me from the Torah itself. I will prove to you from the Torah that the land of Palestine does not belong to Zionists. It's illegally occupied. So when you mention interfaith dialogue, I would want to tell all the people, Qari Asim, all these people who give out statements, the people around Qari Asim, all of them, that when you talk about interfaith dialogue, you need to have real interfaith dialogue. You need to mention that they are illegally occupying that land according to the Torah itself. They do not even follow the teachings of the Torah. That is what needs to be mentioned in interfaith dialogue. Not placing flowers and condolences. Have real dialogue. So Islam is tolerant because when we call for one state solution, we call for Jews to live in the one state. We call for Christians to live as they have been doing for 1400 years, with the exception when the Crusades happened, when the Crusaders invaded Jerusalem and the blood of Arabs was shed, Christians and Muslims alike, and Jews. So it is the Muslims who are tolerant. It is the Muslims who can only establish the one-state solution, which I will be mentioning shortly. So, point 19 mentions, while Gaza redevelopment advances and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, so they do not even mention what the Palestinian Authority reform program is. What does that entail? You want to reform the Palestinian Authority? Go and reform the Knesset, Donald Trump. Go and reform your friend, Benjamin Netanyahu, the murderer of children. In 2014, when Israel carried out its strikes, over 300 children were killed. Yet, the rabbis here never condemned that. The rabbis in the UK did not condemn that. Do not mention a few rabbis who are such a minority within the Jewish community. It's like mentioning a fringe group within the Muslims, or even a fringe group that are deemed Muslims. It's like mentioning a small fringe group. There is no real condemnation from leading rabbis. So, what they mention is a reform program for the PA, and then may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood, which we recognize as the aspiration of the Palestinian people. Well, these 20 points are real dictatorial, real colonization, real Anglo-Euro colonization, that it will be up to the Anglo-Euro white man to decide when the Palestinians are ready for self-determination. I tell you how they will have self-determination. Remove all your armies and leave them. Remove your illegal settlements. Remove the border patrols. and allow the Palestinians back home. All of those above million who have been evicted from their historical homeland. And then point 20 mentions the United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and Palestinians on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. And that is where we go onto the topic of a one-state solution, because there was a support of Qari Asim from Leeds. This man claims to represent the Barelvis. He claims that he does not actually represent anyone except himself and perhaps a few people around him. That some of his supporters, in conversation, they said to me that a one-state solution is ridiculous, what you call for. This is because these people do not understand what one-state solution entails. They do not even understand the historical process, what is referred to as the peace process. But before I go into that, we will take some of your questions, and then if the questions are good, if the questions are engaging, then I will engage with the questions. Otherwise, we will proceed to the second segment. Someone mentions, who is going to destroy Israel? You mentioned when this war began that Hamas will, but they have now been defeated. So who's going to conquer Israel, which has a strong army? I did not mention Hamas. Hamas is a proscribed terror group in the UK. I've never mentioned Hamas. I've said the Palestinians. The Palestinians will finish Israel. But not only the Palestinians, the Jewish people themselves. The Palestinians and the Jewish people themselves. And I will come on to that when I mention the one-state solution. What do you think of Arab state complicity in the genocide in Gaza through the Abraham Accords? Not only through the Abraham Accords, it was also through a document that was leaked recently. It states that the Arab nations, some of them, were carrying out military exercises with Israel even into 2025. Even into 2025, it paused now when Qatar was bombed. When Netanyahu bombed Qatar, those military exercises were paused. So, of course, there is something which Sheikh Abdul Rahman Hassan Habannaka, rahimahullah, he has a book, Zahiratul Nifaq. Nifaq, hypocrisy, is something that exists from the beginning of the revelation of Al-Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions munafiqeen, until our time today, people who outwardly believe but inwardly they do not. So in the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that there will be leaders in the end time who will have the form of a human, but their hearts will be the hearts of shayateen. So that is the time we live in. And there is also a hadith which mentions that the rulers will fight over rulership, over authority, the way donkeys fight, but Asqalan will be the place of a great battle in which 70,000 people will be made shaheed. Asqalan. This is in Al-Mu'jam Al-Kabir of At-Tabrani. So, someone asked the question, Nu'aym bin Hammad alludes to the Sufyani controlling Jerusalem. Is this true? This is yet to be seen. Sufyan is a leader that appears. He has not appeared as of yet. He appears after the war for the gold in the Euphrates. I believe before Sufyani arrives, what is referred to as Israel will be finished. Israel is not a power. It's not a superpower. October the 7th demonstrated how flimsy Israel actually is. The bombing of Tel Aviv by Tehran demonstrated how flimsy what is referred to as Israel actually is. And remember, before the current war, the secularists and the secularist, what are referred to as secularist Israelis, were at loggerheads with what are referred to as Talmudic or religious Jews within what is known as the State of Israel. So, someone states, please speak about the current situation in Pakistan and the protest from Tahrik Labbaik. At the moment, I am not well informed of what is occurring in Pakistan and what has actually occurred on the Pakistan border. So at the moment, I will not comment until I am fully informed of the situation in Pakistan. If the Palestinian will destroy Israel, then why the need for the black banners? The black banners are a later event in the future. The black banners are after the Sufyani. Someone states the Islamic year 1450 will be May 2028. And do you think we will have major changes in the Muslim world like we did in 1400 Hijri? I believe we are observing major changes every month. Every month we are observing major changes. Someone asks, what are your thoughts on Pak versus Afghan war? Very sad. Pakistan and Afghanistan are at war or were at war or had border skirmishes and aerial bombings. Very sad that two Muslim nations went to war like this when they are very similar in culture, very similar in many ways, especially the north of Pakistan. KPK has a porous border with Afghanistan. They are one people. Remember, Kabul was a part of the Mughal dynasty to the point that Mir Zaid Hirawi, major alim was from Afghanistan, but he would go to Delhi to meet the Sultan of Delhi, and he worked in Delhi. It was one region. So we must have Muslim unity. Some refer to it as pan-Islamism. It's a possibility, but there are many players involved. There are many factors. It's not black and white. So very sad that soldiers of Pakistan died, Afghanis died. It's very sad Muslims have died. People who can stand up against the aggression of India, Hindu extremists in India, the extremists, not all Hindus. There are many good Hindus. I'm talking about Modi. And against the aggression of what is referred to as Israel. So very sad events in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Sheikh, is it safe to go Palestine or Al-Masjid al-Aqsa? It's never safe to go there, but why should you be frightened? Go to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. If an IDF terrorist kills you, you are shaheed. You're going to pray in the masjid. You're going for a peaceful pilgrimage. You're going to pray your salah. But why are you scared? If you are killed, you're shaheed. If Ba'athist Iraq returns, can the drying be stopped? Ba'athism is finished now in the Middle East. In fact, the Ba'athist party, thank Allah, is finished in Syria also. Baathists were responsible for the bloodshed of many Muslims. And realistically speaking, Baathism will not return. It died with the death of Mish'al Aflaq. He died in 1989. Saddam Hussein claimed he became a Muslim. He carried out his funeral. But Baathism is finished. We need to go back to Khilafah, not Baathism. And even if the Baathists came into power, if it is the divine decree that the Euphrates dries and uncovers a mountain of gold, no one can stop that divine decree. Someone states Iran and Zionists could be playing a big game. Very conspiratorial of you. It really demonstrates your IQ. Besides Iran being Shia, do not let that cloud your judgment, your political judgment. It's absolutely absurd of you to think there is a conspiracy between Iran and Israel. Give credit where it's due. Iran bombed Tel Aviv. It destroyed a lot of the infrastructure of Tel Aviv. Is fear of American retaliation a valid excuse for inaction from Muslim nations? No, the Americans will not retaliate against Muslim nations if they unite and attack what is known as Israel. That is demonstrated by Iran alone. The United States, Iran alone attacked Tel Aviv. Was Iran attacked by the United States? The answer is no. But imagine a military strike from Turkey and Pakistan, Egypt and Iran, for instance. Theoretically speaking, they will not do so. Turkey even placed sanctions on Iran after Erdogan met Donald Trump recently in the White House. Someone mentions Kitabul Fitan, mentions Shu'aib bin Saleh conquering Jerusalem. Yes, it does mention Shu'aib bin Saleh. This is also in the Sunan of Ibn Majah, but it does not refer to him conquering. It's not in reference to the conquering of Jerusalem from Jewish occupation. It doesn't mention Jewish occupation. Someone asks, are you aware of the homosexual Peter Thiel and his company? The answer is yes. Peter Thiel has significant influence in certain quarters and is a cult leader. I've read on him in The Guardian. There was a long article regarding him in The Guardian exposing his cult. Someone asks, who lived in Palestine before Islam? It was a Roman occupation at that time, but it was a mixed population of different ethnic groups, including Arabs. So you should read up on that. It was a colony of the Romans for centuries, Palestine. Prior to that, it had different indigenous groups, Phoenicians and others, so many different groups. You can read some literature on the history of Palestine. Someone states Mughals did not have a sultan. The title sultan is actually given to them in some of their books. The books that were published in the Mughal era, they would write a sultan, Aurangzeb, a sultan Aurangzeb, for instance. Someone states, you mentioned previously a group that will protect Palestine. And someone asks, what do you say, which group is that? That group is the Palestinians. The Muslim Palestinians of Palestine are that group. Someone asks, are the Canaanites or Phoenicians Arab tribes? The answer is no. Someone says regarding the Mughals, Sheikh, sir, it was actually emperors. Trust me, they abolished all sultanates. You may be conflating for the Delhi Sultanate. So can you give me the name and the term for emperor in the Mughal times? What was the term that they utilized? So we will go on to this next segment, and then we will go back. Just to remind you, I will be covering your party. So I will be covering your party, Jeremy Corbyn's, your party, shortly, after just mentioning something with regard to the one-state solution. Now, the reason why I will very quickly go on to what is referred to as a one-state solution is because recently someone was criticizing me for stating that when a crime happens, it's not essential for every Muslim mosque or organization or every imam to come out and condemn an action which he is not responsible for. So a person associated with Qari Asim and others, they said to me, it's ridiculous of you to propose a one-state solution. I believe some of these people who are even clerics in or imams in masajid who discuss these issues have not read in depth on the issue itself, do not understand the nature of Zionism, and I will relate this also to your party and Jeremy Corbyn shortly. But Zionism, the three things I will say to every Muslim is, number one, we are anti-Zionism, we call for the dismantling of Zionism. Number two, we call for the dismantling of what is referred to as the State of Israel. We call for a one-state solution. So the common counter-argument is, how can you, out of Palestine, call for a one-state solution when the Palestinians themselves have agreed to a one-state solution? This is in reference to Yasser Arafat and the Oslo Accords in the early 1990s. Now, the response to that is very easy, that those Oslo Accords were a failure, a dismal failure. And that failure led to the current crisis. So from the Intifada starts in 1987, the first Intifada, the uprising, unarmed uprising. And then Yasser Arafat agrees to the Oslo Accords. And then what happens from that time into the presidential era of Bill Clinton, the Palestinians lose over 40,000 acres of land, up to 2000. Then from 2000, the second Intifada starts. Many people did not take note of it after 9/11, but from 2000 to 2005, there was the second Intifada. The Jewish occupation did not want peace with the Palestinians. All they have been looking for is evicting Palestinians from their land and taking the entire land, including Gaza, including the West Bank, even though they left Gaza in 2005. But now the extremists, all of them are extreme, the so-called Israelis, all of them are extreme. But the Knesset, members of the Knesset, what is referred to as the Israeli parliament, they want complete occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, what they refer to as Judea and Samaria. So the peace process and the two-state solution, which Erdogan always mentions two-state solution, the peace process, and does not address the issues in Palestine. So someone asks a critical question. They said, Sheikh, would you say the current Judeo-Christian alliance in the West and ongoing Jewish expansionism in Palestine is the latest evolution of capitalist Christianity? I would say it is. So you have the Christian capitalism in Europe developing from Catholicism initially. Of course, you have the Crusades, which is a form of expansionism, but later the alliance with Jewish bankers, because Jews were forced into banking due to their situation and persecution in Europe, and as an occupation, some of them were forced into banking. But this alliance led to Protestant Christianity permitting usury, and then successively, the admin is just changing the battery, bear some patience. But successively, what happened is that they permitted usury. And the question asks, can you touch on how such alliances and usurious banking go hand in hand? The response is that the current Christian alliance that we do have is based on usurious banking. So in response to your question, Judeo-Christian alliance in the West and ongoing Jewish expansionism in Palestine is the latest evolution of capitalist Christianity. And yes, we would also say that the Christian Zionists, someone asks, who are the Christian Zionists? We would say they had a strong role in British history, and they also had a strong role in America. And they currently, AIPAC, which is the Zionist lobby in the United States of America, is strongly influenced by what is known as Christian Zionism. So Israel is on the verge of firstly, it is fractured. It's a fractured state. And a good book to read on this book. People ask for book recommendations. Israel on the Brink, 8 Steps for a Better Future, Ian Pape. Even though the author utilizes terminology which is terminology that we would not necessarily utilize, but it's a very good read from the Jewish opposition to what is known as Israel. So this is all you guys who took British passports from Pakistan, who are Maulvis and condemn me for saying one state solution, you guys must have acquired reading of the English language. People in Pakistan read better English than us. They even write English better than us. So many writers in Pakistan and academics very good at English. But you can read English, so acquire this book and read this book by Ian Pape, Israel on the Brink. So firstly, we have Israel, what is referred to as the state of Israel, that Israeli society is dangerously divided between messianic theocrats and selective liberals. This is what Ian Pape mentions. The rise to power of a radical right-wing government in 2022, he states it marked an extreme escalation of these political fractures. So it's a fractured what they refer to as a nation. It's not actually a homogeneous nation, but it's fractured ideologically. It's of course fractured on racial and ethnic grounds. You have black Jews, you have Jews from Asia, you have Jews from different regions, and then you have the overarching ruling elite of the white European Jews and Russian Jews, who are known as Ashkenazi Jews. So when people say with regard to occupation, it is in fact an Anglo-Euro occupation. It's one of the last colonies killing away at an indigenous people. Then of course you have the fact of the failed peace process. So over the years there has been a peace process, but it has failed miserably. And what has happened is that there has been appeasement towards what is known as Israel, while the expansionism continues. And this leads to more war. So it led to what we observed on October the 7th. And then, of course, what has happened is that what is referred to as Israel is increasingly isolated internationally and is losing even the support of the international Jewish community. Even though I have not heard much from the rabbis here in the UK, but the younger generation, the secular Jews, they are moving away from the legitimacy of what is referred to as the State of Israel. And of course, the October the 7th catalyst, the 2023 attacks, I would like to say that Benjamin Netanyahu failed in his war objectives. He failed. He claimed he was bombing and invading Gaza to disarm Hamas. Hamas has not been disarmed. Hamas's recruit drive has increased. They have more recruits than ever. Ideologically, they have expanded across the borders of Gaza. The war objectives of Benjamin Netanyahu have been a failure. He has disagreement within his cabinet. He has disagreement within his government. He has disagreement within the Knesset. In the coming days and weeks, we may observe and witness the fragmentation of the Knesset, the fragmentation of what is referred to as Israel. It is on the verge and on the brink of finishing. It will finish at the hands of the Palestinians, and it will finish at the hands of the Jews themselves. That is why a one-state solution is that you have one state which does not base itself on racial lines. A state, if we utilize the term state, it does not have racial designations for its citizens. Jews are equal and Palestinians are equal. But the problem that poses for the colonizing forces is that demographically it's a Palestinian land. The Palestinians have the right to return. So we as Muslims, activists, and even the non-Muslim friends who are supportive of our cause, we must call for firstly to the right of return of the Palestinians. This must be central. The right of return. The Palestinians must return to their land, which is occupied Palestine. There are even Palestinians in the UK who originate from what is known as Tel Aviv. There are Palestinians that they are not given the right to return to their ancestral homeland. And secondly, what I would state to those clerics who ignorantly call for a two-state solution, I would say to them, rather than addressing this absurd concept of two-state solution, because you hear it from Erdogan or you hear it from different politicians, what you should be debating as a cleric, as an alim, as an imam, is the illegitimacy of what is referred to as Israel from a religious point of view. It has no right to exist in Palestine. It has no right to exist from the religious texts of the Christians, the Jews, and of course, Al-Quran al-Kareem. This is what you should be advocating for. This is what you should be debating the Zionists. And the challenge remains. I challenge all the Zionist rabbis in the UK that they can never debate me on the legitimacy of the current Zionist occupation from what they refer to as the Torah. So, addressing the illegal settlements, we must call for the dismantlement of all the illegal settlements. And this is what the Arabs should be advocating for, the Arab nations. This is what Erdogan should be advocating for, but he does not. The right of return of all Palestinians and the dismantling of what is referred to as the settlements, and then you will witness the breakup of what is referred to as Israel. This is not impossible. We've had countries like Yugoslavia disintegrating. We've had countries like South Vietnam disintegrating. South Vietnam does not exist. You have Vietnam. Similarly, Yugoslavia. So in the past, we have witnessed regime change in South Africa with the BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions that started on South Africa. Of course, we have that on what is referred to as Israel that started in 2005. Some people think it's ineffective. It is not ineffective. It is effective. You have a boycott, then you divest. Divestment means pulling out funds, pulling out investments, and then you have sanctions which have not been placed. So sanctions are essential. So if I summarize these points, I will summarize. Someone states, Sheikh, you are completely wrong about South Vietnam. So we will fact check that. Fact check what is the status now of South Vietnam. But what I will mention is that these steps can be carried out of calling for the right of return of Palestinians. So this person's name, Legendary Knight. Legendary Knight, go on fact check. South Vietnam no longer exists as a separate country. It was merged with North Vietnam in 1976 to form the Unified Socialist Republic of Vietnam. You sound like, to me, Legendary Knight, like them guys who think Maulvis do not know anything. You must be one of them guys sitting in the masjid who tries correcting the Maulvi on everything. There is a crowd of your type of people who perhaps never achieved anything in dunya, so then you decide to be the committee leader of a mosque. You know, you have these people who lose their elections and they want to be committee leaders of a mosque. So get your facts right. Also, we will fact check your other claim. You claimed that the Mughals were not known as Sultan. So I am going to check now this claim. You claimed that the Mughals were not known as Sultan. You strike me as an imbecile. So, before I was derailed by this legendary knight, more like imbecile knight, I want to reiterate that we should call for the return of the Palestinians, the right of return. We should call for the addressing of the settlements, that the settlements be dismantled, illegal settlements in the West Bank and elsewhere. And we must call for a debate and dialogue that the state, so-called state of Israel, has no religious legitimacy. We as ulama must be vocal on this last point. It has no religious legitimacy. Of course, we know it has no secular legitimacy, but we must call them out for the lack of religious legitimacy. So, someone asks a question. Trump's recent tariffs on China caused a dangerous downturn on both crypto and stock market values. Companies like Microsoft, Tesla, etc. took a real hit. Where do you place these kind of market downturns amongst current events? So this relates firstly to the lack of confidence in the economic system. So the current economic system, which has encroached all over the world, this economic system has many failures that poor people, they suffer from those failures. So the failing market economy in certain countries is one of the ashratu sa'a, which I will expand upon another time. Now, before going into your party and Tommy Robinson, I will be taking questions from you, and then we will go back to your party and Tommy Robinson. So, just a note, people stop bullying Legendary Knight now. I'm sure, did you fact check we will fact check the Mughal Sultan fact also. Before we go on, we will actually fact check with regard to the Mughals, did they go by the title of Sultan? So the fact checking, so Legendary Knight has got something right. You got something right, Legendary Knight. What did you get right? He got right that no, Mughal rulers were not typically called sultans. Typically. They preferred titles like Badshah or Badishah, which were of Persian origin. The term sultan was used by the earlier rulers of the Delhi Sultanate, which the Mughals overthrew in 1526. While they sometimes used other titles like sultan, they sometimes did use, so again, Legendary Knight, you didn't get this right correctly. Sometimes they used other titles like sultan. They are more famously known for using the more prestigious title of Badshah. So sometimes they did utilize the term. So we will go back to Q&A. I will be taking questions. And then just a reminder, so you can inform others to join our live stream. I will be discussing Jeremy Corbyn, your party, and Tommy Robinson after the Q&A. So, someone asks, who is the Yemeni Caliph named Al-Qahtani mentioned in Nu'aym bin Hamad Al-Fitan? So he will come after the rule of Al-Mahdi. This is a very future king. It's not found in our time. It's very much in the future. Sheikh, as an Iranian, meaning the questioner is Iranian, what do you think of Israel turning their attention to Iran as the US imposed more sanctions recently? Yes, for the so-called Israelis and the United States of America. Iran is enemy number one. So as as much as they are able to, they will attempt to harm Iran. And the surrounding nations will be utilized to harm Iran also. So Iran is fighting a war on many fronts. Someone asks, who is the caliph who will die and his three sons fighting for the treasure prior to the Mahdi? Nu'aym bin Hamad alludes this being the Sufyani's father. Firstly, the hadith is also found in the Sunan of Abu Dawood. It just mentions Khalifa. Khalifa here means successor. It's a sifatul mushabbaha, Khalifa. And as you know, it can come in the meaning of successor, the one who succeeds someone. So what they state regarding this is that the person who will die, he will be succeeded. Who it will be? If you read my book, Navigating the End of Time, you will know that the rule is that the sign is not known until it occurs. So we will not know who this is until it actually occurs. So someone asks, can you provide a detailed definition in English for Darul Harb? Some accuse Hanafis of today of misportraying it and say it only refers to land where active fighting is taking place. They are correct. Many of the Hanafis are misinterpreting Darul Harb. I want to make this very clear. This is for all the students of knowledge and fuqaha, people who study and teach fiqh. I would want to say post 1908 to post 1924, when the Khilafah was formally abolished, some of these definitions need redefining according to modern standards. Someone says, with regard to the protests in Pakistan, too many people saying, why protest after the ceasefire? I believe they are not protesting about the ceasefire. Number one, it's about one state solution. And number two, the protests should not stop. We call for protests to disarm Israel. We call for protests for the right of return of Palestinians. We call for protest for the illegal settlements to be dismantled. We call for protests that the Palestinians have the right to bear arms. There are many things to still pressure the government. The ceasefire is not sufficient. In fact, the Palestinian campaign has now picked up. It has picked up and it will not finish until what is referred to as Israel is finished. It's not going anywhere. So continue with the activity. So someone asks, so what will the Sufyani do in terms of conquest or rule? He will actually pillage different areas. There's a link between Sufyani and Egypt, and there's a link between Sufyani and Iraq. Of course, he rules from Damascus, but he appears from modern day Jordan. So the exact details in terms of quiddity will only be known when it actually occurs. Someone asks, what is the Al-Hadda and Al-Wahiya blasts during the month of Ramadan, as mentioned in the Kitab al-Fitan? The response to that is that I discussed this in my book, Navigating the End of Time. And we cannot know the exact details until it occurs. But people presume it may be a nuclear attack because it mentions a column of fire appearing in the east. and people are exhorted to store away food. So, there is an additional question here in the messages. We will now go to the third segment, which is regarding Jeremy Corbyn and what is referred to as your party. So, as many of you know, there is an additional question. Sheikh, it is commonly found in works like the Hashia, the person means the Hashia of Ibn Abidin, that it is fard kifaya for a community to have people who can sue farmers, people who know agriculture. Does this not demonstrate that simply having these simple components is sufficient for a people to thrive? Why do people struggle to trust this? Because they believe in an international order which imposes the IMF, the World Bank. They do not realize that if you have farmers and people who can make clothes, an autarky, an economy that is sufficient for the people, they will not suffer as much from the sanctions. Iran has demonstrated this, how Iran is under sanctions, yet Iran has self-sufficiency. Like this, even certain governments across the world in South America and other areas of the world, they have demonstrated this. But Islam has a complete way of giving this independent system or organism to the Muslim community and those who live within the Muslim community from the non-Muslims. And this is something found in the Caliphate. For more detail, read my book, Intellectual Intifada. Inshallah, in the future, we will be having in-depth discussions regarding the work Intellectual Intifada. So, with regard to Jeremy Corbyn and your party, now my experiences, especially in the past 2 years with regard to politics, is that so many people who stood up for elections, so many of them did not actually stand up for Palestine. They utilized and catapulted themselves on the Palestinian issue, to the point that I went to certain areas in order to resolve disagreements. I went once down south towards London and attempted to resolve a disagreement where the Muslim Pakistani community, they placed two candidates claiming to stand up for the cause of Gaza. I advised them, you will both fail miserably. Neither one stepped down and they both lost. The same happened in our own area, where we had an independent candidate who announced the fact that he will stand, and then another person was propped up and he lost miserably also. This happened in other areas where I traveled across the UK. So when Jeremy Corbyn announced your party, there are many opportunists who are jumping on to what is known as your party in order to have seats in the council elections next year. And most of these people who are elected as councillors, to tell the truth, I prefer white councillors. I'm going to say this irrelevant to people being offended. We had good white councillors. I'm commending the white people as councillors. In UK, you are good councillors. We prefer white councillors in our areas because they do a better job, frankly speaking. We had Jeremy Evans, who's known as Jerry locally, good man in terms of his counselling work. He did fantastic work. He would clean up everything. And then the Pakistani community didn't vote him back because he was not a part of their Baradari, the tribal system. Jerry Evans was a good councillor for Spark Hill area. He carried out fantastic work. He did work for everyone. Whenever they needed a task done, he carried it out. Yet our community failed him, did not vote him back in because he was not from their tribal system. You have a miserable way of doing politics in this country. So I prefer the white councillors simply because they help keeping the clean street. We wouldn't have this HMO problem. You had Muhammad Hafiz standing up for elections in our constituency, yet this individual was involved in opening so many HMOs in our area. Unregulated HMOs. HMOs that have no regulation, drug dealers, drug addicts from all over the UK being placed into our area. He doesn't even live in the area, which is not a problem necessarily, but he opened HMOs in the area. And people vote these people based on the Bradri, the tribal vote. Shabana Mahmood won on a tribal vote. Now she's Home Secretary. Imagine that. Home Secretary being voted in on a Pakistani tribal vote. That is how miserable the politics of this country has become. You have a Home Secretary that is voted in just because the Gujjar Bradri or the Jat Bradri or the Raja Bradri has this tribal groups have decided to vote her in. So the white councillors we had in the past, I remember them in my childhood in the 1980s. In the 1990s, they did fantastic work for the area. We want them back in. And of course, they need other credentials, their skills, their professionalism, all these things. Meaning, if there's someone from a different background and he has a better skill set, he's better at the job, of course, he should be voted in. But not simply because he is brown, he is given preferential treatment, like Sadiq Khan or these type of people. Just because you're brown, you will be placed at the front. No, you need a good skill set. So someone asks, what about Ahmed Yaqub? So Ahmed Yaqub, firstly, he hasn't been voted in. So you can't judge the man based upon him not being voted in. Having said that, no one is perfect. But at the time, there were people who, at the time, someone says dirty tactics in politics by the British, of course. And at the time when Ahmed Yaqub stood up, so many people came to me, they said, why are you backing such a candidate? They had criticism. I said to them, okay, you stand up or you place a better candidate. None of them came forward because it was a Gaza emergency vote at the time. Gaza emergency vote. But he never won. But now we will observe those policies, insha'Allah ta'ala. But I would say that we need better councillors who come out and sweep the streets with me. I sweep the streets ever so often. Come out and sweep the streets, not just for photo opportunities. Actually go and clean the streets. Look at the state of our streets in Birmingham. Because of the HMOs, because of drug addicts that are placed into those homes, because of landlords who have properties in the inner city, they give the property to a drug addict with total disregard for the neighbors. And then you stand up for local MP. And then the state of the streets is so bad. We have rubbish, we have potholes, and I believe, of course, having said that, the Birmingham City Council was bankrupted by the dinner ladies. The dinner ladies took them to court, and when they took them to court, I think they lost 300 million. So I would say also, as someone rightly points out, the drug dealers. Let's sort out in our Muslim majority areas, let's clean up Britain. Let's clean up our areas. Let's clean the rubbish. Let's deal with the drug dealers and the grooming gangs. This is our obligation. Similarly, deal with all the social problems that we have. And of course, some people, they say they agree with my domestic policies, they disagree with my foreign policy views. We remain anti-Israel, we remain anti-Zionism, we call for the dismantlement of Zionism, but at the same time, we clean up our streets from drug dealers, from grooming gangs, and from rubbish. Let's focus on these real issues. You want to tackle Tommy Robinson? That is the way. You want to tackle the problems that we have in this country? That is the solution. That we Muslims become a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So, just to mention, with regard to this Your Party, so many people joining. I want to mention that there are some good Asian people who do good local community work. There are some good. An example of that is some of our local people who I know who will be standing in the area, and they do good local work. But we need more. It's not sufficient. Someone says, Sheikh, what do you have to say if you know about Tom O'Carroll coming into the Labour Party after Corbyn became the party leader? O'Carroll is the former chairman of PI and had been convicted of having indecent images of children. He was later expelled from the party. So what do I know about PI? That PI was a movement to normalize paedophilia in the 1970s, paedophile information exchange. And this movement was quite huge in the Labour Party. So many of the Labour Party members at the top were advocates for paedophilia in the 1970s. That, of course, Tommy Robinson, the idiot, will never mention that. But, of course, there are many things that can be addressed. Now, what happened with Jeremy Corbyn was, firstly, I mentioned earlier that Ken Livingstone was thrown under the bus. And Jeremy Corbyn did not demonstrate a spine. He did not have a spine. Naz Shah was MP in Bradford after she defeated George Galloway. George Galloway was defeated in Bradford around circa 2012-2013 and replaced by the Labour Party Naz Shah. Now, Naz Shah was placed under pressure from the Zionist lobby to retract certain things which were not actually anti-Semitic. This term anti-Semitism, as if this term is coined to differentiate Jews from general racism. Why not just use the word racism? Why have a specific term for the Jewish community? Nevertheless, Naz Shah was pressured to the point that she was removed from the Labour Party at that time. And Ken Livingstone, he stood his ground. But Jeremy Corbyn did not have a spine. That is well known. Today, what we would have to ask Jeremy Corbyn, is he a supporter of the one-state solution? And is he anti-Zionism? Anti-Zionism is the only way of determining the correct political position in terms of foreign policy in this country. And the anti-Semitism crisis, according to this book, this is a book, again, earlier I recommended Israel on the Brink, essential reading. Now I recommend, if you cannot be bothered reading books, you know, some of these politicians never read a book a week. They perhaps never read a book in a year. It's a sad state of affairs. We have these people governing us. They should read a book or two in their lives. So, Weaponizing Anti-Semitism. This book is written by Winstanley, and it covers how the Israel lobby bought down Jeremy Corbyn. All of you guys going around pretending to support your party, grifting, go and read the book. So the anti-Semitism crisis was manufactured. So many of them, if that pressure was put on them, they will step down straight away. The book's central thesis is that the so-called Labour anti-Semitism crisis was not an organic problem, but a concerted effort by pro-Israel lobbyists and organizations in alliance with the Labour right wing and British intelligence agencies. Targeting Corbyn's pro-Palestinian stance. According to Winstanley, Corbyn became a target because of his long history of supporting Palestinian solidarity. His left-wing political project was feared by Israel and its allies. So, of course, now your party has become, it's not actually completely socialist, because real lefty socialists transcend borders, support workers and unions across the world. This is a very mitigated socialism. And then also what this book covers is a plot to prevent a socialist prime minister. And what he claims is that a plot was engineered to destroy Corbyn's bid for power and to stop a socialist from entering Downing Street. And what it mentions also is that mainstream media outlets, including The Guardian and the BBC, uncritically amplified stories about Labour's anti-Semitism without proper fact-checking. Doesn't history repeat itself? It repeats itself that people today do not fact-check, meaning these media outlets do not fact-check so many things. Remember, on October the 7th, so many times they mentioned that babies were killed and targeted by Hamas, a proscribed terrorist organization here in the UK. But when you fact check that, it was not factual. So the book includes interviews with what is referred to as victims of the purge. Many individuals who were victimized by the purges, carried out by the Labour leadership under the guise of tackling anti-Semitism, a loaded term. Some of them, they tweet, they misquote and tweet. They misquote and tweet in order to place the accusation of anti-Semitism. Likewise, Winstanley critiques the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism. He argues that the definition is being used to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and silence criticism of Israeli policies. So this, of course, the book calls out lobbyist groups and influence specific groups like the Jewish Labour Movement, Labour Friends of Israel, and the Board of Deputies of British Jews, which these groups work to inflate the public perception of anti-Semitism within Labour. And Winstanley also states that some of these groups were supported by the State of Israel. Not surprising, today I've heard that so-called Israel funds people by paying them £700 per post on social media. Imagine how much they pay Tommy Robinson. And the book also references the Al Jazeera documentary, The Lobby. So there's an Al Jazeera documentary known as The Lobby, which explored how some of these groups were allegedly backed by the State of Israel and wealthy donors. And of course, he also covers Ken Livingstone and other things. There is also, just to elaborate on the Israel lobby, AIPAC, there is a book of Ian Papp, which was released last year, Lobbying for Zionism on Both Sides of the Atlantic. Essential reading also. So then we come to your party. So Corbyn fell under pressure from these accusations of anti-Semitism, and then literally threw many of the Labour Party people under the bus. After which we have now your party being declared. Now, this your party already has internal conflict. So it mentions that co-founders, people claim that Zara Sultana, an MP, voted in Coventry. She has been involved in a public dispute leading to her departure from the party. Now, they may reunite, but that dispute was based upon Zara Sultana getting ahead of herself. She has to remember she was voted in under the Labour Party badge, under the Labour Party. And she stayed in the Labour Party for a number of months post October the 7th. She stayed in the Labour Party while the genocide was occurring, but she left earlier this year. So whether she would be even voted in based on her own credentials is something to observe. Will she be voted in based upon the credentials that she has? But she has stated, of course, very controversial statements like saying that you could only be a part of the left if you were a liberal left in terms of sexuality. So someone asks, Sheikh, with respect your party, what do you think of Zara Sultana, who leads a social profile with an aggressive pro-LGBT trans rights stance? I've even voted for the decriminalization of the abortion bill that proposed allowing abortion after 24 weeks. It's rich fishing for votes, talking about murdered babies in Palestine, whilst voting for the murder of babies in the UK. So yes, I spoke against this. There's a group of people who claim to have Muslim backgrounds. They interviewed me and I spoke against this. They never released the interview. And I said to them, you do not have permission to release the interview edited. It must be complete. What did I mention? Firstly, equating between aggressive pro-LGBT trans rights with human rights is a false analogy. Someone has to claim they are the same is wrong. But in this country, the LGBT and trans, they already have their rights. So what rights are you referring to? What do you want to do? She criticized Adnan Hussein. Now, Adnan Hussein correctly warned or spoke against transgender people sharing toilets. For instance, you may have a man who claims to be a woman. Why should he, a biological man, have the right to share the toilet with women who are biologically women? It makes no sense. So Adnan Hussein, MP of Blackburn, correctly spoke against this. And she spoke against Adnan Hussein, Zara Sultana, saying that you have no right to be on the left if you do not support these type of things. Of course, we would want to ask her, how left is she actually in terms of economic policies? Is she a liberal economic in economic terms? Not the liberal left, but I mean capitalist liberal economic. So the second part, which mentions the decriminalization of the abortion bill, a 24-week baby she voted to abort that baby. A 24-week baby. How does that even fall under rights? The woman has the option to abort the baby in the first stages of the pregnancy. So, therefore, Zara Sultana, it will be interesting to see if she wins on her own credentials, but she is totally discredited in terms with the Muslim vote, totally discredited. Then, of course, she started, there was a power struggle between her and Corbyn, and she alleged that the party operated as a boys' club. She was treated appallingly and excluded completely. How true those claims are, only the MPs involved can respond. But the friction centered on who controls the party's finances and membership. Again, as I said, this type of politics starts happening again when you have these type of people involved. With Sultana claiming she was sidelined after unilaterally launching a membership portal. Then, of course, they have organizational issues. Messy launch. The initial launch was described as botched by the Byline Times due to confusion and a lack of coordination. And they have an unofficial membership portal. So her unilateral launch of a membership system led to legal advice being sought by the party and distrust amongst supporters. And additionally, poor communication. So local organizers have claimed, and they do have poor communication. There's an election coming now in Moseley, a by-election, and there's a woman standing claiming to be from your party. She doesn't have the official recognition. Within your party here in Birmingham, they have two different camps. You have the Zara Sultana camp and the Corbyn camp. They have already split the vote. And they are doing the same as what they did during the Gaza vote. They did not stand up for Gaza. They stood up for themselves, those people who split the Gaza vote. But they have split their votes already. So the by-election will be very interesting. And there is poor communication. So local organizers have claimed that national membership details were not being shared with them, hindering local branch development. So already there is a power struggle. People love power. And they have undefined identity. The party's provisional name and the ongoing leadership issues suggest it has yet to resolve fundamental questions about its brand and structure. Meaning, what is the identity of your party? What is it focused upon? So Zara Sultana said, I've always stood with trans community and I always will. The same forces targeting migrants and Muslims are attacking LGBTQ plus, I don't know how many letters you're going to add to that, people, especially trans people. Our safety is in solidarity. None of us are free until all of us are free. That's the new party we're building. This was stated on 31st August. Bigotry has no place in it. Now, no one is calling for bigotry against anyone. But the English population, the white English population, has valid concerns regarding immigration policies of this country. They have valid concerns. The English population, I repeat, have valid concerns of migration like anyone will in any country. When mass migration is changing the demographics of your country, you have a valid concern. So for her to conflate LGBT with migration and with Muslims, all of these are three different issues. The LGBT and trans people in this country have their rights. So why are you continuously banging on about this issue? With regard to migration, the government needs to be called out with regard to migration, even though the expenditure is less than 0.5% of a percent of the economic budget. that needs to be fact checked. But people have concerns with regard to demographics and mass migration. So this should not be equated. So with regard to how do we protect the lay Muslim from being riled into these groups that sell them the false idea that Muslims fall into the same bracket of victimized minorities as the groups she mentions here. Muslims in the UK are not victimized. We have in this country over 2,000 mosques. We have freedoms that you do not even have in the Middle East. We do not fall into the same bracket as illegal immigrants. So the Muslims need to wake up. I said to you that take the responsibility of taking care of Muslim majority areas. How do we take care of Muslim majority areas? Clean them up. Rid those areas of drug dealers and grooming gangs. And do not think that grooming gangs do not exist. Okay, yes, grooming gangs were exaggerated because the wider population has the problem also. But there are grooming gangs that are operational. We as Muslims should be the most moral citizens of this country. If we are failing by taking drugs, by dealing drugs, by drinking alcohol, by committing sins of adultery and other type of sins, then we are failing our deen, we are failing Islam, and of course we are failing society. So those things should be our priorities. With regard to your party, it has a serious risk of failure because it has fledgling confidence of its supporters. Secondly, the priorities. The control and dispute of control has diverted attention away from the party's stated goal of building a new left-wing political alternative. It's not an alternative. It's actually a failure. And the party has a historical precedent where there have been failures. Now, before finishing, I will take on your questions and then we will finish for today. Please relate the questions to the current segment, which was on Jeremy Corbyn's Your Party and the failures of the Your Party, as well as the failure of the politics within the UK. Someone asks, how do masajid in Muslim areas get together and have initiatives such as cleaning streets or a neighborhood watch for drug dealers? Lozels Road Masjid, led by Hafiz Shuaib, one of my students, one of the top active students, he has a whole program of cleaning the streets every Saturday. Also, another student of mine, Aqil, he carries out cleaning on Stratford Road in Sparkbrook every Saturday. Another student who is the Imam of Somerville Road Masjid, Awais, he carries out cleaning every weekend also. So these things can be arranged. You must arrange them and clean up the areas. The problem is so many people, they want to clean up the areas in order to have a good CV when they stand up for elections. That should not be the motive. The motive should be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Someone asks with regard to the Fabian Society and how Corbyn's a member. Yes, the Fabian Society was founded by thinkers like George Bernard Shaw. It has leftist outlook, like population reduction and so many other things. Someone asks, what are your thoughts on Zach Polanski and the Green Party policies? Well, the Green Party did split the Gaza vote in certain areas. Because of Green Party candidates, the independents never got in because they broke the vote. Should Muslim independent MPs join your party or remain independent? I believe Muslim independent MPs should remain independent. Which party should we vote for? I do not necessarily advocate for one party. I advocate for good individuals. So you base it on the candidate also. So, inshallah ta'ala, we will finish there. If there are... Someone asks, Sheikh Asrar, should I visit Indian illegally occupied Kashmir in 2027? If you can go, then go. Someone asks, the United Kingdom's total public spending budget for 2025 and 2026 is projected to be around 1.347 billion. The UK spent 2.8 billion supporting refugees in the UK in 2024, roughly 0.2% of its total. The entire budget was 1,347 billion. From 2025 to 2026, the projected budget is 1,347 billion. The UK spent 2.8 billion supporting refugees, roughly 0.2%. 0.2% of its total spending budget. What I would want to mention with regard to this is the UK has, because the UK is now like a colony of the United States, post World War II, of course, the events of World War I and World War II led to Britain becoming a semi-colony of the United States, and its foreign policy is dictated by the United States of America. Britain losing its autonomy. So when Tommy Robinson talks about Britain being great again, talk for an independent, autonomous foreign policy, that Britain should not follow the foreign policy of the United States of America. But Tommy will never say that. The dimwit, the twit. He will never say that because he doesn't even know these facts. Britain is following the policies of the United States of America. It doesn't even have an independent foreign policy. So if you want Britain to be great again, call for an independent foreign policy. But that foreign policy that Britain has been following has led to war, destabilizing of Iraq, leading to thousands of refugees, destabilizing of Libya in 2010, when Gaddafi ruled and David Cameron's government destabilized and toppled Gaddafi, leading to Libyan refugees. The Manchester bombing, the bomber was a refugee from Libya, destabilizing Afghanistan, leading to Afghani refugees. You have all these Afghani refugees now in Britain because Britain invaded Afghanistan in 2001. These are all facts that are never mentioned by Tommy Robinson. I hope all these points get out, and I will conclude today's live. Inshallah, see you in the future. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.